And let me just tell you a little bit about Damon Brown. He helps side hustlers, solopreneurs, of which he is one, and other non-traditional creatives bloom. A best-selling author and 4X TED speaker, Damon co-founded the popular platonic connection app Cuddler and led it to acquisition within a year, all while being primary caretaker of his infant first son. He now,
Let it ride.
yes, he now guides others through his consulting coaching. And he also has a long-running magazine column and the book Bring Your Worth, which we're actually going to be raffling off, and his latest book, CareerRemix, Get the Gig You Want with the Skills You Got. So without any further ado, I'd like to have you help me welcome Damon Brown.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Yeah.
I'm
Thanks for the
excited too.
clap.
It's so good to have you here, Damon. It's just been we've had some really nice conversations getting this together, and I'm just going to start with I did an intro of you, but I think it would be great for people to. I always think it's good for people to hear people's trajectories, their career trajectories, and how they got where they are. It's because it's never a linear experience for any of us, right? It's
Absolutely
like
not.
when you have
Absolutely
a
not.
job, people think, oh, you've always had this. And it's like, no, I didn't. I had to go through this, and this to get here. So could you share with us a little bit about that and also what brought you into wanting to do career coaching along with everything else you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So with the ageism video, I related to that because I became an entrepreneur after I already had like 2 or 3 different careers. And so I became an entrepreneur. I was in my late 30s. And as you mentioned earlier, I have my little one who's about to turn 10. So it gives you an idea as far as my age. But it was a period of time where I lived in Silicon Valley, was a full-time journalist, and I covered like technology and things of that nature. And at that period of time when I was in Silicon Valley, I was in my early to mid 30s, and I was already considered old in Silicon Valley. And this was during a period of time Facebook was just beginning. I was in the same rooms as Steve Jobs when the iPhone came out. He had passed away a few years after I was in Silicon Valley. And it was interesting when I left Silicon Valley and I came up with these ideas of startups. I just got married. About a few months after we got married, I found out that our first kid was coming. And I was like, I want to do this. But my background was journalism. What I realized quickly was that it's not about the work that you do, but the toolbox that you can bring from the work that you're doing to the next thing. So as a journalist, I've been a writer for Playboy, the New York Post, for ARP, the magazine. I've done some features for them. And well before I became a member. And what was interesting is that if you're a journalist, you're following where the culture is going. You ask the right questions. You figure out where the trends are. If 2 people talk about something, that's a coincidence. But if 3 people talk about it, it's called a trend. Like there are basic things that you learn in traditional journalism. That applies to entrepreneurship. And so I did my first startup called So Quotable, which allowed you to capture people's quotes if you have an interesting conversation. I did that when my son was 3 months old and my wife went back to work. So again, me being 100% the primary caregiver for 12 to 14 hours a day to when my son was about to turn 1. And I got the app out the door. And that was the same exact time that TED asked me to do my first TED Talk. And so I ended up doing my first TED Talk related to that. That got the attention of 2 other entrepreneurs who are doing an app called Cuddler, which connected people for hugs. My background is understanding how technology and culture collide. And I understood as a journalist that there was a deprivation of people connecting physically. This is well before the pandemic. This was in 2014. People actually have longer lives and are healthier if they touch. So people that are deprived of touch actually have shorter lives. There's scientific evidence of this. That happened to match the discussions I was having with these two other entrepreneurs as far as connecting people for hugs. And not hookup apps, not anything salacious, just purely hugs. A lot of people thought we were crazy, which I understand, but we got it out the door. It was around the time of my, just after my son's first birthday. And it became the #1 app, not only in America, but in several other countries around the world. We were on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, talking about creating a cuddle and hugging economy and all these other things. And within a year, we ended up selling the app at a profit because we had bootstrapped it and created it ourselves. But that was going against the grain of what a lot of people thought, including my age as an entrepreneur. I was approaching 40 at that time, I believe. And then the second part of using my toolbox as a journalist to say, this is a cultural trend. I'm not just going to cover it as a journalist, but I'm actually going to create this next wave. And it being really rewarding for me and the founders that I worked with. That led to me to be a career coach, because I realized that a lot of us are what I call non-traditional entrepreneurs. We have our day jobs and we're doing a side hustle. A lot of y'all in the audience, it's a matter of figuring out what might pay the bills or what your main thing is. I have 2 little kids now, so they're my priority. You might have older or people that that are dependent on you that you're taking care of. Might be your spouse, might be, your aunt, might be even younger folks that need you right now. That's your priority. But then how can you build from now, as my book suggests? How can you build from now based on the resources that you have? Mm-hmm. And after my first major business book, The Bike Design Entrepreneur, came out and became a bestseller, I went on the road and people kept asking me if I could do coaching and if I did one-on-one coaching, which was not in my playbook. But again, I had the toolbox for it because I'm used to being a journalist and asking ideally good questions. And I'm actually a non-traditional entrepreneur myself. And so with that, that's how the coaching came along. So it's been a wonderful ride. And I really do believe that no time is wasted. Like whatever resources you have, whatever you have in your toolbox, it can apply to your next path too.
Great. Well, since you have been doing this coaching, it would be interesting to know maybe one experience that you had coaching a client who was 50 plus and how you have helped them consider job opportunities that would be a fit for them.
Yeah, the best example I can give is if you are familiar with Seth Godin, he's a pretty popular coach on a whole nother level. He's actually one of my mentors. I got a chance to connect with him a couple of years ago, so I love his work. He put it extremely well, and this has been reflective of some of the hundreds or so people that I've coached over the last couple of years. When you turn 60, and he was about to turn 60 at the time, he put it as you only have so many bullets left in your gun. In other words, if you have a project that's going to take 5 years, and I have a few of my books behind me. Some of my books took 5 years, but some of those books were written when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Now I'm middle-aged, if you guys can do the math. And so that time becomes a lot more precious. So what it becomes is, how do you want to spend your life? We have our 20s, we have our 30s, arguably our 40s to kind of figure out the knobs and figure out what goes what, and maybe discover who we are on some deeper, broader level. Once we get later in life, though, there's a level of insight that we have that younger people don't have. Our job, and my main thing when I coach folks who are in my stage of life or later, is you already know what you want to do, what kind of impact you want to make, and definitely you know what you don't want to do. So there's a level of seriousness to the discussion. And going back to what Seth Godin talked about, he doesn't just take projects and do random things anymore. He's like, no, I'm 60. I might have another 20, maybe 30 years if I'm lucky. How am I going to spend this time? Now, I'm a little bit younger than Seth Godin, but I still have that philosophy because time is short. So to answer your question, I think there's a level of intensity and passion and dedication and focus that happens towards our later years that honestly, with the people that I coach that are very young, I'm trying to instill what y'all have in them to be
Mhm.
like, if you already know what you love, I figured out that I loved writing when my youngest son is 6. I was younger than him when I realized I loved writing. So I've been blessed with like decades. Some of y'all have actors and creators and all that. Y'all get it. There's certain moments where you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Unfortunately, if I get on my soapbox for a minute, we'll sometimes delay that because this is what we should do, or this is what I have to do, or this is what my family will accept. But as we get older, as some of y'all can relate to, those barriers start to go away.
Mhm.
As a coach, I'm trying to help people accelerate that process. Because I think in our heart, we know what work gets us up in the morning, what work keeps us alive, what work keeps us going. We have some type of insight into that, or at least we know how we want it to make us feel. And we know when it doesn't make us feel that way. So as a coach, I try to minimize the it doesn't feel that good to and increase the it feels really good and at least get you on the trajectory to have more of the feel good stuff, no matter what your stage is in your life.
And I really like that concept of, really learning how to use the tools that are in your toolbox, but I also think that one of the things that sometimes people need to get some training where they need to get something a little bit further to be able, it might be just taking a class or getting some kind of a certification. And what would
Absolutely.
you say to that regarding, people who are of this age group?
Absolutely. Like I'm a lifelong student. It's cliche, but it's true. My poor kids, they're 6 and 9 right now. And we're listening to a motivational audiobook on the way to school today. And they're like, Dad, what is this? Like, what are you what are you listening to? And I'm like, this is a great audiobook. I've listened to it for years. In fact, I listened to it while I was rocking you guys to sleep, back several years ago when you were babies. So the constant learning, I think, is really, really, really important, no matter what you're doing. Now, I think what's really, really key is that learning takes place however you see fit. When I was in high school, I would mentor middle school students. When I was in college, I would mentor high school students. I should have saw back then that I was really into coaching, but I just didn't put it together until decades later. My point is that it could be mentoring someone else that you're able to solidify your particular insights. It could be, I have a YouTube show at youtube.com/Brown Damon. I do a show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That could be part of your learning. Like it could be the audiobooks that you're listening to on your way on your commute or while you're washing the dishes. It could be conversations like we're having right now. I think our concept of learning sometimes is like we need to sit somewhere, be sturdy in class, get a certification and do that. And I don't think that's true, particularly in this day and age. There's literally millions, probably billions of hours of YouTube, Skillshare, um, teachable.com, the LinkedIn learning. Uh, I can go on and on. And coaches like myself, there's so many other non-traditional ways to learn. And so you being a student doesn't mean you have to get your MBA or you have to get your PhD or something. Being a student means paying attention to what you need to get to the next level and putting that into your toolbox. I think it was the motivational speaker Jim Rohn talked about if you want to do well, work for someone else. If you want to become wealthy, work on yourself. So all these essential things are available, and you have this opportunity to grow. And as someone just mentioned in the comments, you don't have to go to school to do that.
Mhm.
You have school right here on your computer or on your phone. I mean, it's such a privilege to be around at this period of time. I love school, and I also love the non-traditional school. Either way, you can put some stuff in your toolbox.
I get that. And I'm also a lifetime learner. And I noticed on the chat that somebody had mentioned who has money for school. I just want to mention this because a lot of people don't know about it. We usually we say something about it in our trainings, but I don't know if you realize that if you have a library card, you can get into LinkedIn Learning for free. And they have so many workshops and trainings, including computer classes. So please, take a look at that, and if you don't have a library card, get one, and that's all it takes. And
Oh,
it's
please get a library card. Please get a
yeah,
library card.
I'm like a big library foundation and all of that stuff. It's really important to me.
Absolutely. I've worked with libraries all across the country doing nonprofit work. I was a entrepreneur in residence at the Toledo Library back in Ohio. Like, I
Mhm.
love libraries. They're so important. Yeah, I'm so glad that some of y'all have library cards. I'm
Yeah.
of that generation where, probably one of the last generations where, if I was researching a book or I had to do a report or something, I was at the library. My kids are having a different experience with the library, but they definitely have their library cards. That's a requirement in my house.
Right, right. Great. So how do you recommend clients deal with ageism? It's real. It happens, right? How do you
Yeah.
how do you suggest clients really work with know how to deal with it in exploring job opportunities? Because that's something we have to look at.
Absolutely. Well, number one, if you're in an environment and there's ageism being shown towards you, I think as Oprah Winfrey said, no, actually, I believe it was Oprah Winfrey, if someone tells you who they are, then believe them.
Mhm.
And so I'm really into culture. So if that culture is saying that age isn't wanted there, or we don't look at you or value you as much because of your particular demographic, then that's indicative of the culture there. You're going to have to make some tough decisions if you want to be in that culture, right? So that's off the bat. If you're already in that situation, and you have my sympathy and empathy, I've dealt with my own issues. So that's number one. Number two, something that I so believe in is to thank you. It was actually Maya Angelou. Thank you for the correction, Casey. All right, but I think it was on the Oprah show. That's right. Thank you. See, yeah, like the brain's working okay today, but it's just a little bit off. So thank you for the love. So Maya Angelou, rest in peace to her. But number two is to always have your own thing going on. So if you end up catching my show, the youtube.com/Brown Damon, the Bring Your Worst show, or if you end up reading Career Remix or the one we're giving out today, Built From Now, I talk about side hustles and creating multiple streams of income.
Mhm.
I have about 50 or so passive income streams right now. The power of that is that if one of my clients, one of the people I'm working with, ends up going into a cultural area that I'm not messing with, I don't have to stay. This goes back to the educational thing we just talked about. Not only is it one of the most powerful, perhaps the most powerful time in history to actually educate yourself. Like, we have the Library of Alexandria and more literally at our fingertips
Mm.
for free in a lot of cases. But it's also one of the most powerful times to create your own value. When you start to create your own value, of course, my show is called Bring Your Worth, and you start to bring your worth, then not only are you not dependent on folks who see your age or other demographic traits as a limitation, not only are you not dependent on them, but you also can make the choice of creating your own value and worth. And as you create your own value and worth, then other people can go beyond whatever ageism or issues they have and say, oh, yes, I want to work with this person. Like, for me, I'm a middle-aged African-American guy, with two little kids at home. But I'm also a successful entrepreneur. That entrepreneurship did not come from venture capitalists or some big company coming in and saying, Damon, we see you as an entrepreneur. You're great. That did not. Because like I said, in Silicon Valley, I was African-American, which is pretty rare even to this day in Silicon Valley. And I was also considered old. So it's like, I was not looked at as an entrepreneur. Left Silicon Valley, had the number one app of 2014, and sold the company, which a lot of those folks did not. But I had to create my own path and my own value. And now other people are like, oh yeah, Damon's great. But they didn't necessarily see it that way at first, particularly with having little kids at home.
Mhm.
And so the first thing is, if you're in that type of environment, recognize you're in that environment.
Mhm.
Don't fool yourself. Don't put rose-colored glasses on. If they're being ageist, accept that they're being ageist and try to figure out an off-ramp or make some tough decisions. You got to pay the bills. I'm not judging you. Just be recognized the environment that you're in. But then number two, which goes to number one, start to build your own thing. That could be a tiny side hustle. That could be coaching. That could be whatever your particular skill set is, helping people act on the side and doing a little program with them. Being a writing coach, if you do screenplays. There are ways to use that toolbox that I talked about and apply it to different services. And as you do that, you become less dependent on whatever cultural area requires you to be accepted or not accepted for your age.
That's really helpful. One of we had somebody present at one of our virtual how-tos a couple months ago on content development. And there's so many jobs in content development now, and if
Particularly
you're a
nowadays,
writer,
yes.
you could probably, explore that. We're looking at ways of being able to open up more training around that in the Career Center, but it's just something you should explore, because if you look up content development, and that's really writing content for social media, and organizations are looking for people to do that, it's a great opportunity for, it doesn't matter how old you are, it matters that you're a good enough writer that you can get that information out there in a positive way.
Yeah, I was just talking to a group of friends, and we're all around the same age, so we're all middle aged. And I was talking about that, where there's a level of confidence that I have in my career because I could do it until I'm ready to stop. Whether it's coaching, whether it's doing the Bring Your Worst show, writing books, doing public speaking,
Right.
as long as I'm physically capable of it, which is a pretty, it's a pretty wide span of that, then I can do this until I'm done. And I would like all of us as creators to find different ways to do that. Even as actors, finding different ways to create and be in our greatness, no matter what age we're at. And it's not like we're athletes, which is a different discussion. It's
Right.
like, no, we're different. And as creatives, we should take license and embrace the length of the careers that we should have. Like age doesn't matter quite as much for a lot of our careers. And for the places that do put that judgment as far as age on us, there's ways that we can do things ourselves to help alleviate that.
Great. Great. I wondered if you could, we are going to be raffling off your build from now,
Yeah.
how to know your power, see your abundance, that's it, and nourish your world. And what inspired, and I wanted just to talk to you a little bit about what inspired you to write that book, in the first place. And you, if I'm not mistaken, you wrote it during COVID.
I wrote both of my books during COVID. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Not recommended, but it was something that had to be done, especially with two little kids. Um, so briefly, I came out with a lot of business books over the course of 3 to 4 years. A couple of them became bestsellers. And then I was like, I'm done. Like, that's enough. Like creatively, y'all can relate to this, where you have like this creative streak and you're like, I'm empty. Like, I published 200,000 words in the last 3 years. I need to go sit down somewhere. So I went to sit down somewhere, and then the pandemic happened. And by July of that year, it hit around St. Patrick's Day here in Las Vegas. And that's when everyone got quarantined home. 3 months later, July of 2020, I got a random message from an old colleague of mine. And they said, Damon, what are you working on? Because I know you're working on something related to this. You need to get something out there. And again, as creatives, I don't know if you have that feeling, but when you're tired, but there's something that needs to get out. It's kind of like the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell, where you get that phone call and you can't ignore the phone call. And it's like, no, the next cycle is going to begin. And it's like, brother, whether you're ready for it or not, it begins. And what I wanted to do with Build From Now, that's why it's called How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World, was that the world was going to stop for a couple years. My wife's a doctor. I have other people in science in my family. So we all knew it's like, it's not going to be a week. Some people that was a week is like, no, it's going to be a little while. The world is going to pause for a second. And we have this moment of musical chairs. That's the best analogy I can put it. For people who are part of the LGBTQ community, for people who are minorities, or for people who are cis women, like all these voices that have traditionally been marginalized, suddenly everyone doesn't know what the heck's going on. And suddenly all these other voices, including mine, can be heard. And then at a certain point, the world's going to start up again. And the people that are traditionally in power, however you'd interpret that based on your culture, the people who are traditionally in power will quickly come back into power. So what are you going to do with this little window of time to get some amazing stuff done? What are you going to do? Because if you didn't like the world as it was, and you've been complaining a lot about how the world has been, and suddenly the world stops for like a year, and you have all this time on your hands, you have all this technology, most of it free, available. Again, you have the Library of Alexandria all over your devices. You have these things that you want to get on your head, your screenplays, your books, your big ideas, these things you want to pursue, and you're just at home. Are you just going to sit there, or are you going to build from now? So that's the concept of the book. What are we going to create with this space of time that we have right now? And we're coming to the end of that space. When we talk a year from now, the game's going to be totally different. So we're still, that's why I think build from now is still very important. A year and a half later, like we're still in that space, and soon it's going to be business as usual. So as creatives, I think we have that responsibility to do things that disrupt the status quo. The concept of build from now comes down to these 4 resources that we all have. It's focus, agility, time, and energy. They're called the fates. Focus, agility, time, and energy. So fate. All of us have those resources throughout our entire lives as long as we're alive. But depending on the season that we're in, we might have a whole bunch of one of them and not much of another one. So my kids have a ridiculous amount of energy. They're 6 and 9. They're healthy. They can run around in circles. They can't focus worth a goldfish. But if you have kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, you know, right? You know. And no judgment on them. That's how they're supposed to be. Me, I don't have a ton of energy right now because I got a lot of stuff going on, but I am extremely focused. So how those resources play into us having insight into how we can make things move. And most importantly, and this is kind of the secret subtext of it, allows us to have gratitude for whatever resources we have. Like if you're currently retired, you have an amount of time that I would kill for. I don't have much time at all. My T is like -1 right now. But I could look at it as, I don't have any time, so I can't do anything. And then if you're, say, 90 years old, you might be like, wow, Damon doesn't have any time. I got a bunch of time, but I don't have a whole lot of energy. So I can't even get stuff done. But you're not having gratitude for the time you have. And so it's almost like a discussion around gratitude as well. I have a free quiz that I will throw in the chat called it's buildfromnowquiz.com. And about 1,000 people or so have taken it. And it's a 3-minute free quiz that allows you, based on the questions that I'm giving you, to figure out what your biggest resource is. The book is broken down into the resources. So if you know your main resource is focus, there's an entire chapter on focus. You could be like, okay, this is how I get things done, being focus rich. Your main thing might be agility, which is your ability to adjust to different circumstances. Whole chapter on that. And so I really wanted to give some type of framework on that. The third level of it is that I realized this was the backbone of my coaching practice, which I've had for several years now. And it wasn't until the pandemic happened, and ironically, in a meta way, I slowed down enough to realize, oh my gosh, for all my coaching clients, and I've had like 200 to 300 over the past few years, I'm like, for all of them, we go through this process. I just never quantified it. So it's also, and I talk about that in the book, it was also revelatory for me to slow down a little bit more and be like, oh, this is me codifying, this is me taking the toolbox from my years as a coach and putting it into perspective. And so that's why hopefully it'll be a valuable book for you guys, because it kind of takes a lot of the energy from my coaching practice and puts it into that context, and hopefully will help you realize all the resources you have versus all the things that you lack.
Great. Well, I'm just so impressed with what you've managed to how you managed to get to where you managed to get to today, and that you're here for us. I would like to bring in our panel to be able to join this conversation and introduce them, because I feel like we have so much more to talk about. So, and once again, I just want to mention to everybody, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, because we will be going there to ask your questions, not in the chat, in the Q&A. Great. So let's get started. Please, I'd like to introduce Ross Berg, who is our employment specialist. And also you can turn off on your camera if you can, Ross. And
Okay.
then also Matthew Wilson, who is our, and I'm hoping I'm saying this right, but our employer's account manager. You can come on, Matthew. You can turn your camera on. You can turn your camera on, Matthew.
I can see myself. Can everyone see me?
Yes, we can see you. We were
Okay,
looking
great.
forward to that. I think I might have had the chat blocking you, and that's what happened. You moved, but that's okay. So we're going to get started here, just to kind of get this conversation a little bit deeper, and I want you all to feel comfortable talking about it. So I wanted to first see, what does the job front look like for those who are 50 plus community in this, that would be interested in. And I'm going to throw that to you first, Matthew, because you're doing that kind of work every day.
Sure, thank you. Well, first I'd like to situate myself and frame like where I'm coming from, right? My name is Matthew. I'm a proud union member. My career spans over 2 decades in the entertainment industry across multiple mediums and contracts. One of the reasons I'm so excited to be the first workforce account manager at the Entertainment Community Fund, the artist formerly known as the Actors Fund, is because I get to leverage my expertise navigating the industry, building a career as a freelancer. As we all know, we were the gig economy before the gig economy was cool. And so I'm stoked to be able to both leverage that experience and support my entertainment industry colleagues, because in addition to my career in the industry, I've also navigated work in higher ed. I was teaching career communication and personal branding at the Valley School of Business to Fordham University. And that was right around the beginning of 2020. I actually started a full-time role at Hudson Yards here in New York City, developing and implementing a new experience. That started March 1st, that shut down March 13th, 2020. And then that threw me right back into the job search. And I bring that up just because I like to share that not only have I navigated the labor market in the entertainment industry, I've also navigated the labor market outside of the entertainment industry at this particular moment, which is truly, not to overuse the word unprecedented, the disruption is unprecedented, and it still continues to be unprecedented. And so I'm just so grateful that you're all joining us here today to talk about this topic, because it can be a harrowing conversation. And I really value that you've joined us here to talk about it. And also to say it's also different to be navigating the job market as someone coming from the entertainment industry, potentially pursuing new opportunities. And so I just wanted to frame that as we get into this conversation around what is the market for the 50 and older. When I'm looking for a job, particularly in 2020, I found myself standing on the edge of what I called my Gen existential crisis. I was on the edge of a cliff. It was very, very scary. And the job search is still scary to me because I built an entire career in the entertainment industry, and I don't always find that that's legible, so to speak. So that is all to say that when I'm engaging with employers and when I'm engaging with clients who are coming through the fund, those are the kind of conversations that I'm engaged in, because I believe a job search isn't so much a job search, it's job research, which is a long way to answer the question, what does the job front look like for the 50 job seekers who are 50 and older? It depends. And it depends on the echo chamber you inhabit, and depends on what you're hearing. It depends on your goals, and it also depends on the industry and the disciplines in which you're pursuing. But I stick to my perspective, which is I'm a pragmatic optimist, and it is absolutely possible. It just does require engaging and searching and what I call strategic persistence, which I believe anyone 50 years and older possesses in spades.
Thank you. Thank you. And, I just want to say too, it does have a lot to do with one's networking and going to places and meeting with people. Most of the jobs that I've ever gotten, and I heard that from you too, Damon, that, you were out there doing things and meeting with people, and an opportunity came up. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit, Damon, and then I'll go to Ross.
Sure. Yeah, like as I touched on just very briefly, I did my entrepreneurship. So I did the 2 startups, second one, Cuddler, ended up selling it, ended up doing my first major business book, The Bite Size Entrepreneur. It did well. So of course, when it goes well, you go on the road. And I'm going on the road. And as I mentioned earlier, I would do the Q&A, and then people would come up and be like, hey, can I grab you a cup of coffee and we can talk more? And I was confused for a second, because I'm like, well, I just wrote this 60,000 word book, and I just had the Q&A with, like, what do you mean coffee? And I was like, oh, you want specific insight for you. Oh, okay. Because sometimes there's opportunities that are right there, valuable skills that we take for granted. Like, I can communicate fairly well. Not everyone can. So that ability to communicate fairly well is super valuable in this world. There might be things that you can do that you take for granted. You're like, oh yeah, I do that, with my eyes closed. But that becomes very valuable to the workplace, and I think that's really good insight. Matthew, I think you used the word like deciphering, or some of it, right? It's not quite, they can't quite figure out what your resume means. And so it becomes more, I would argue, more about like the toolbox versus what you did, right? And it's like, oh, okay, you help lift people up and you help them understand their careers, which is different than saying I was a teacher, right? And so just finding that language to not only learn it yourself, but to also give it to other people so that they can give you those opportunities too. Because I had to listen to them and be like, oh, I should be a coach. That's my next move. Even though that was not on my game plan. I'm a pretty good planner. That was not on the map. And I was like, oh, I missed something. And come to find out, I love coaching. But the audience, the people that I was serving told me that I couldn't figure that out myself.
That's great. That's great. How about you, Ross? And you want to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Sure. So my name is Ross Berg. I've been with the Entertainment Community Fund for close to 8 years now. Started off as a career counselor. I moved into the employment specialist area. I'm a writer and a musician. So working at the fund has been a really wonderful marriage of sort of all my interests and passions and so forth. And happy to announce that the job search seminars that I facilitate, where we take a deep dive into personal branding and networking and job interviewing and job application materials, will be offered every Wednesday starting in January. So I hope that you will all plug into that and any and all services that are of interest to you at the fund.
Thank you. Thank you. And how about in your mindset, what are you seeing happening for people people who are part of this business, as far as the kind of job opportunities you're seeing out there for them?
Well, it's interesting. I think my mantra for people that are seeking jobs, and really of any age, but it's really focus on what you can control. And I think the good news for 50 plus applicants is you simply have more transferable skills and experiences to draw on. I mean, I really kind of resonated with Damon talking so much about the toolbox notion, because when you think about what you can control in that job search, the material side alone, as you're crafting your cover letters, writing those resumes, putting together your LinkedIn profiles, practicing your job interview responses, your 30-second elevator pitches for networking, those are all things that you can get a sense of control around. And as you gain more experiences and more skills, you simply have a bigger well to draw from. And one of the things I often hear from 50 plus clients is they'll swear up and down that they have nothing that they can find that will fit with a certain job of interest. And I would say the great majority leave my office with kind of a newfound understanding of, wow, I didn't know all these things that I did before that were in my toolbox did in fact connect very strongly with what employers are looking for. So a lot of it is really learning how to scour those job descriptions. I think a lot of this has to do with research and relationships. The job search is very much about researching yourself, researching what the needs are, finding that overlapping connection, that Venn diagram, if you will. And as we talked a little bit about the importance of networking and creating those relationships. So again, focusing on what you can control and really taking full advantage of everything you have to offer. And sometimes it's really hard to assess ourselves. And so as a little commercial, if you feel like you're a little bit stuck with, I'm not sure how to identify my transferable skills. We have a 3-part series called Career Journey at the fund, and which heavily gets into helping people identify those transferable skills. So please know that you're not alone in all of this, and please plug into all of our services and really allow us to help you kind of figure this out.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And I used to say, when I used to do trainings around resume or just interviewing, I'd always say research, resources, and networking. That's how you find work. You really have to research and see what's out there. You have to go for your resources and networking. And I can't say enough about networking. I'd love to hear you guys, all of your input around LinkedIn. Because some people feel sometimes in the business, oh, I don't need to be on LinkedIn because it's more business prone. But I'm seeing more and more people from the entertainment industry on LinkedIn, and and how that can be helpful. And I'm going to start with you, Matthew, and then I'll go to Damon and then to Ross.
Sure. Let's talk about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a social media platform, and the thing about all the social media platforms is there are values to each one of them. LinkedIn technically has a reputation for being primarily professional social networking. And just with all of the social platforms, you can invest as much time and or energy as you're willing to. I personally believe it's crucial to be on LinkedIn as a job seeker, and I'll tell you why. Job seekers are particularly vulnerable. And notice I'm talking specifically about job seeking through the traditional job search route, right? And the reason LinkedIn is so crucial is this notion of deciphering and making oneself legible. LinkedIn is a tool where if someone searches for you, they can find you. A lesson, I'm a former Career Center client. I'm really proud of that. And something I learned from one of my career coaches and counselors, Alexandria, she asked me, well, what's your digital footprint? I'm like, huh? And what she was referring to was when I interview for a job, if someone Googles me, what are they going to find? Now, they're going to find a lot of stuff, right? Like IMDb, my work on PBS, TED, all these things. But by really refining, and choosing to use LinkedIn, I literally started using my full name, Matthew Allen Wilson. I created a Gmail account, Matthew Allen Wilson, specifically for job seeking. And if you type in Matthew Allen Wilson, you're primarily going to see me on the first Google page, because there are a lot of Matt Wilsons out there. I used to get jazz musician Matt Wilson's residuals. But I gave them back. I gave, because I'm a good union member. I did not cash them. I contacted him and I gave them back, which is to say LinkedIn, I think, is invaluable for a job seeker, not even to create content, just for research purposes. LinkedIn is such a powerful tool that it behooves all job seekers to know how to use it, just so they can learn more about and to continue to research and refine the roles that they're pursuing. Because as Ross said, when it comes to putting together your tools, your resume and your interview skills, you can't do any of that unless you're in conversation with a job description, with an actual role. I hear so many folks who are lost when it comes to finding a job, or thinking, oh, maybe this job might be nice. You got to do market research to determine, is that role actually out there? What's it called? What's the job description? Because until you have that job description, until you know it actually exists, you're not necessarily targeting something that will ultimately serve you. And LinkedIn is an incredible tool for that.
Great, thank you. How about you, Damon? How do you feel about LinkedIn as a tool?
All right, so I agree exactly with Matthew's talking about. I'm not seeking a job. I haven't sought a job in a long time, right? I'm very much an independent route. And I've been on LinkedIn for like 15 years and active on it for 5 to 6 years at least. Even with my creative endeavors, there was a period of time when I was doing my startups, I needed a lawyer. I was actually able to use LinkedIn to find lawyers in my network. When I needed to get a cover designer for my independent books, including Build From Now, I was able to use that as a resource. So it might not even matter whether you're job seeking or you don't want to be on LinkedIn. The fact is that the professionals that you might need to work with are on LinkedIn. And so it might not even be about, right? So it might not even be about you. I think that's really important. Back when social media was way more popular, it's not as popular now, but back when social media was way more popular back in the day, again, when I was in Silicon Valley, and there are like 20 different options as far as where to go. What I would always share with creatives is to go to where your people are. So I have a big presence on YouTube. My YouTube presence began when I started doing a lot of professional public speaking, and the pandemic hit and I wasn't able to go on the road. So then, well, how are people going to see me speak? How am I going to do my virtual speaking and all that? Oh, there's a thing called YouTube. It's been around for like 20 years. Maybe I should get involved with that. All those decisions come into where you want to serve people. And I always put things in the context of service. The people that you want to serve, where are they? The people that are going to, hire you for the next gig, whether it's a movie or a screenwriting position, or you're in the, the writing room for a TV show, whatever. Where are they? Okay, go to where they are. I'm not big on Snapchat because a lot of people that I coach aren't on Snapchat, so I don't need to be there. I'm barely on TikTok. So you go to where the people are that you want to work with, and or the people that you're going to network with in the future to get your particular projects done. I think that's about as simple as I can make it.
Great, thank you. Thank you. How about you, Ross? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is, in the personal branding course that we give, we frequently talk about this idea that, we all have a personal brand, sometimes whether we know it or not. And what I mean by that, and Matthew talked a little bit about this in his responses, let's say you find a job of interest, you put together that cover letter, that resume, you do your research, you do everything right, you find the fit, you send your materials to this hiring manager, this company, and maybe they like what they see. Probably the first thing they're going to do is Google your name to see if they can find out a little bit more and what comes up in that Google search, for example. I want you to sort of be thinking about that as your brand, your message. And there's oversharing and there's undersharing. And if you have no footprint at all, the personal branding message actually might be, this person isn't comfortable with computers. This person doesn't know how to use technology. So if you have no LinkedIn page, for example, that could be sort of the unwitting message that you're putting out there. So I wanted to kind of mention that as an aspect of that. And really, one of the most important things about networking is it's remaining visible. And so if you are visible, even on something like a LinkedIn, you're on people's mind, that is a form of networking. It's that you're out there, you're findable, and that becomes a brand that, in a sense, you can control, and you really do want to be controlling your own message. So something like a LinkedIn will allow you to do that.
If I can add on to, yeah, you just triggered me on that, Ross, where it's not only just a matter of being having a presence, but also being contactable. And there's a story, I've shared it for like 20 years, where my first major book came out, again, about 20 years ago. And if you have a website, particularly back in the day, people could send you messages through your website, right? So if you had Yahoo or GeoCities and all that, all back in the day, I'm trying to get as much press as possible for this little book. And I happened to go to my website 3 months after the book came out, and it was someone from a major news station. Actually, it wasn't even station. It was like one of the major ones, like CNN or MSNBC, who wanted to interview me on the topic of the book. And I'm excited, I'm jumping up and down. And then I realized the message was dated 3 months before. So I never checked the messages there. And so they tried to reach me through my website. I had no idea. By the time I reached out to them, obviously, I already missed the opportunity. And that could have changed the whole trajectory of that book. And so it's not just a matter of like you're talking about to have the presence on there, but also to be accessible. There's going to be some folks that only use LinkedIn. I know some of them. They don't use Twitter, they don't use email, they don't use Instagram, they don't use anything but LinkedIn. And they know how to reach me. And I'll get a little message. I see a couple people are saying that right now. So I'll get a little message in my email and say, hey, so-and-so is reaching to you on LinkedIn. I'm like, great. And that's available. And so it's not just a matter of having a presence there, which you so beautifully said, but also being accessible and like people being able to contact you on the dot. Things move way too fast for you to be missing opportunities. And if you're really into the job search, I would have all notifications on.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to that too a little bit, is that I mean, I'm seeing a lot of things like that. LinkedIn, it's so complicated. How do you learn how to do it? We will be having classes in the new year, on it.
Awesome.
But even if you went on to the LinkedIn Learning, through your library, they have some training around that too. And to me, it's always about just being open-minded to new ways of doing things, and I feel like I'm always having to floss my brain, and really allow new, get out old stuff and bring in some new stuff, because it's very easy to get stilted. A lot of people feel that LinkedIn will be ultimately the resume, that we will not be doing the resumes that we're doing now, that if people will just go on to LinkedIn and that's where they'll find them. And I also want to say, because somebody put up coffee, and I think that was such a good thing. Yes, for sure. Get together with people for coffee, get involved with organizations or events that you can meet people and you can connect in that way. So it's not meant just to be on social media all the time on a computer. It's meant to really ground yourself and really be with other people who are interested in what you're interested in, right? And that's how you find opportunity always, so I just want to throw that out to you. So somebody did ask in there though, but what do you do if you have two things going on? You have one thing on LinkedIn, your particular work that you're doing, but you have another job that you want to do. I'm reading Ross put down finding and connecting with your tribe. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Any thoughts about that? You want to speak to that, Matthew?
Yeah, sure. Damon brought up such a really great point about going where your audience is, right? And that's the tricky thing, in that LinkedIn is not a panacea. Okay. On the one hand, we call it a professional networking platform. I started my LinkedIn account probably in 06, 09. I didn't use it. I'm an actor. No one's on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? Meaning from my world. And that was that way all the way up through 2020. I would just offer. The other tricky thing is it's so tricky to analyze it as an individual user. And that's why I mentioned echo chamber earlier, because your feed is really dependent on how you engage with it, right? And so so you do feel alone, especially when you start using it. I will offer voiceover artists have really taken advantage of LinkedIn because they have so many corporate clients, which, to Damon's point, right? Like, people hire voiceover artists outside of our industry all the time. And there have been many voiceover artists who've taken the LinkedIn challenge. And that's how I discovered that was such a burgeoning scene. As far as, I'm so sorry, I got a little bit off track. We're talking, multi-hyphenates. This is tricky. This is so tricky. Because from a marketing perspective, I always want to bring it back to, we're marketing ourselves. If you're a job seeker, this is a marketing and sales job, right? You are marketing yourself, and it's about getting super specific. And being a multi-hyphenate is challenging. You can be a multi-hyphenate, you just might not want to message yourself as a multi-hyphenate. Again, that's why I'm like, use LinkedIn as a research tool to see what else are people doing, who is successful at what you're trying to achieve. Because if you can't find someone that's doing what you want to be doing, or that's marketing themselves the way that you think you need to be marketing, then there might be something to pay attention to, or that might not be where your audience is. Yeah. This is a common question. I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a director, I'm a producer. You've done all those things. LinkedIn might be a place as a shingle to represent yourself, or it might be an opportunity to really hone in on one specific element. And that also might take some testing and some trial and error, ongoing testing.
Great. Any thoughts from anybody else about that?
Well, yeah, I want to kind of expand a little bit on what Matthew said, which is excellent. And sometimes it can be helpful to think about some umbrella terms, when you have 2 or 3 different things you do, and you can think a little bit about it. Maybe all those things have to do with being a creative problem solver. Maybe I'm educating people in a sense in all those things that I do, or I'm empowering others. So, and sometimes you don't feel like you have to do all of this alone. Reach out to us at the fund, take the classes, have an accountability partner, bounce things off of people, your career counselor. And sometimes it takes a while. We always mention, LinkedIn, your branding statement, all of these things are a work in progress. So, be kind to yourself, take baby steps. As Matthew said, try something out, see what other people are doing on LinkedIn. Sometimes there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. If you like the way somebody else is crafting a message and you want to kind of take it from there and make it your own, all absolutely viable options.
Great. And I would love to just speak to this, getting off of LinkedIn a little bit, but what are the kind of skills you feel those in the entertainment and performing arts community bring to the table? What are some of the skills we can go back to them? I mean, one of my things would be, say, communication, anything around that, writing or speaking. But there are people that work behind the scenes too. Any thoughts about that, the kind of skills that people in the entertainment business bring?
I can give some feedback, even though I definitely want to defer to the other folks on the panel. I think one of the things that we have as creatives and as being part of the industry is the ability to memorize and to keep the narrative. All the keynotes that I do, I memorize them. And so it's through a lot of practice and patience and being in my garage, talking to myself and all that stuff. But that's a skill set that's my best way of speaking, but that works for me. But then that's a valuable skill set when it comes to other things too. So me being able to memorize a 15-minute speech, where else can that be put? And I think a lot of us have that, particularly those that are, I am not an actor, but those that are actors, those that are doing commercials and memorizing page after page after lines. Think about that as how much power that is when a lot of people can't memorize much at all. That's serious power. So that's something that comes to mind for all of us that are creatives that do some type of performing or some type of speaking. Our ability to memorize lines is powerful.
Great.
Yes, it is very, very powerful.
Yeah, thinking about it from a job search perspective, sometimes I think it's even helpful to work backwards. Sometimes if you think about what is my audience looking for? In this case, what is this employer? What are their needs? And I'm going to work from their job description. I always want people to remember a job description is an employer's wish list. They don't necessarily expect to get 100% of those needs filled, but you can at least start with what are they looking for? Let me work backwards. Let me look at their keywords and see if I'm able to fit, again, this transferable skill idea. I'm seeing what's important to them. And I did that as a volunteer recently. I'm taking a class right now where we're getting into that. I used a similar database a year ago, and that comes to mind. So you can also connect the dots in a sense by working backwards from starting with what's important to my audience. And sometimes ideas can come to your mind that maybe you wouldn't have thought of if you just sat down and thought, what are all my skills? Because sometimes that can be a little bit more challenging.
You know, when you're working stories, when you're telling stories, when you're editing something, you always go backwards. You always go like, where do you want to land, and what do you need to get there? Is a backward
Absolutely.
flow to figure that out. So, and those of you who are writers, you know that, you know, it's part of the deal. Because we don't have much time. Matthew, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep it shorter this time. One of the hardest lessons I ever learned was, and I'm still learning it as a job seeker, is putting my resume together. I did go back to school because I was interested in expanding my opportunities in higher ed, and even applying for an on-campus job as someone in their 40s. I took my resume to the Career Center and they marked it all up. And I actually didn't understand the feedback they had for me because I was listing a wide range of accomplishments and skills. But it's taken me years to learn. I really need to tailor my resume to the specific job description, the specific needs, and eliminate any experiences and skills that don't speak to it. And it also, I need to demonstrate proof. And this is so hard because so many roles that I've discovered across the entertainment industry, on stage, backstage, above the stage, below the stage, front of house, back of house, we aren't known for our impact. Right? We don't have metrics. And that's often what people want to see. And so, which is just to say, it's hard. I just can't iterate enough. Looking for work is hard. So if it feels like it's hard, and if making a resume feels like it's hard, I think Alice mentioned this, it's like banging your head against the table or the wall. It still feels like that. It doesn't feel good, but that's also why we're here, because I will commiserate with you.
Great. So I wanted just to kind of end on one thing, although there is a question there from Seth. He was asking you, Damon, about volunteering, how volunteering could be supportive, and I know Ross would have something to say about this too, of really finding work.
Absolutely. I think volunteering, I think there's a few levels of it. Number one, like the book that we're raffling out today, it's like about service to the world. So number one, you should do that. Number two is that it gives you the opportunity to play around with something that's low stakes. And so if you're volunteering for something that you think you might want to do with your 40 hours a week or whatever you happen to do, it's an opportunity to play around with it and actually help you figure out if that's really what you want to do, which as a business coach, is like, yeah, before you commit to it, it might help to play around with it, right? The third part, and someone mentioned this in the comments, is that it actually gets you to where you want to be, kind of like a dress rehearsal, right? So before TED asked me to speak, I went to TED 2 or 3 times. And so that they already were in that area. They already knew me. They already were familiar with me. So then when they saw I was doing some fairly cool stuff, they're like, we need you to talk. But I was already in the room, right? Right? You hear me, Matthew. So it's like if you're already in the room, then you don't need to go anywhere. You just need to get on stage, quite literally for some of us, right? So just get in the room. If you're in the room, cool. That's, for me, that's part of the sacrifice you make that other people are not willing to make. That's what got me here, was that I was saying, no, I'm going to get myself up to Canada to be at the TED conference. Yes, I'm going to go and do this. Yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm going to coach someone, this time for free, to see if this is even my jam. Oh, it's my jam? Now it's a major part of my business. But it requires that thoughtfulness beforehand. And so many of us don't want to take that step. But then we're not getting ourselves, as someone said, not getting ourselves into the room. If you're not in the room, then how are they going to know who you are? Mm-hmm. Whether virtually on LinkedIn or whatever your thing is, or quite literally, as far as getting on a plane or going down to the center down the street and volunteering there and seeing what's up. How are you going to get involved? And if they see you involved, then the chance of you being in a place of higher on the list as far as getting involved in a deeper level, they're going to be talking to you first because you're right there. Again, like someone said, I think it was Matthew that said it, like they're aware of you and they see who you are and they see how you operate too. I can go on it all day. Like it's such an important step. And so many of us skip it, which is also what makes it so powerful, because a lot of people don't want to do that kind of work.
Right. And I just also want to say, you want to feel like, you have the opportunity of being around what Ross was saying earlier, part of your tribe. You're around other people that want to do something similar to what you want to do. And that's where you learn how to, meet those people that will help support that.
Yes.
And Matthew?
Yeah, I know we were talking about it as volunteering, but this notion of getting in the room, I just can't reiterate and support what Damon was saying enough. Because I also liken it to being in hiring conversations, meaning all of this relationship building that we're talking about, all of this research that we're talking about has to do with getting into conversations that lead to another conversation that potentially lead to a hiring conversation, right? For me, when the goal was to get a job, that was the terrible goal, because if I didn't meet it, I was a failure. And then I was failing a long time. And come on, I'm an actor. I'm good at failing. You know what I mean? Getting into conversations, getting into the room. That's why statistically, people with a job are more likely to have another job, because you're already in the room and you're already in conversation, which is not to begrudge someone who is not currently employed. There are multiple ways to get into conversation and to get in the room. And Damon, you nailed it. Get in the room.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, remember that's the thing that it happens in the room. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I first of all, somebody did ask about a motivational book that you mentioned earlier. Damon, would you go put that in the chat?
A motivational book?
Yeah, somebody asked it. I think
there's an audio book that you had listened to, Damon.
Said,
wow, that was a deep cut there, as they say in the music industry.
What is the name of that book? Somebody asked.
It was actually called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stefan Hanselman. I'll throw the link in the chat. And it actually got me through some rough times as in being a first-time father with a 3-month-old. So it was very helpful during that period of time. I will throw a link in the chat.
Great, thank you. And because we have to move forward, and we're going to have a little raffle, of your book, which we're really excited about. First of all, I want to thank Damon Brown for being our guest speaker and panelist for today. I want to thank my colleagues, Matthew and Ross, who I salute both of you. You do amazing work, and I know what a difference you make in our community. And I also just want to say something to everyone, because I was reading the chat and various things. Whatever you can do whatever you can do to make sure your attitude is going up and not going down. And whatever that means for you to be able to do that, to support it, being around people, joining groups, doing volunteer work, but your attitude is everything. You could have the best resume in the world, but if your attitude is outplaying your experience, you're gonna have a lesser shot at getting that opportunity to
And
work.
if I can add to that, Joanne, too, I'm really into scientific studies, and scientific studies show that if you're familiar with being myopic means being narrow, you're not able to see. The more negative or challenging our attitude, the more we're going to have a hard time seeing those opportunities. And so open-mindedness and optimism and believing that we have an opportunity waiting for us isn't just a Pollyanna statement, but scientifically, there could be a perfect opportunity in front of us. But if we don't believe it exists, we're literally not going to see it. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is everything, and it doesn't mean that we don't feel our disappointments, but we don't bathe in them, we don't drown in them, you know, and there's a difference. So I would like to thank you all for a terrific panel. I'd like for all of you who can to stay tuned. We're going to do our raffle. I know that you have a hard stop, Damon, so you can leave anytime.
I do. I have two little people that are going to be looking for me in a few minutes.
Yeah, they're going to be looking for you, and we want to make sure that
it's important to know what your priorities are, no matter what. So thank you so much for the love, though. I appreciate it, guys. And I threw all the links into my YouTube channel if there's more insight that you wanted. And then we're actually talking about having some of the content or some of the ideas in here on the channel as well later. So be sure and stay tuned. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going. But any way I can support y'all, you know, I love your work as a nonprofit. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Really pleasure.
All right, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, so